Okay, guys, so good morning. Um, we're continuing our focus on the Great Plains today. Now we're going to look at what life was like for the settlers and Native Americans in the Great Plains. This is something we've kind of already alluded to in some ways yesterday. I'll be repeating some stuff, but ultimately we want to look at how many of the settlers and a lot of the people that came to the Great Plains, how they were kind of treated, how it was different, much different than the East Coast where you had the segregation and stuff. And then we'll obviously look at some of the things with Native Americans, and we may sneak in a little Supreme Court case to the end dealing with the Transcontinental Railroad. All right. So let's get into our notes. So first off, life was very tough if you moved to the Great Plains. It was a very tough life because you were pretty much responsible for surviving on your own. There wasn't a big city, there wasn't a big town. So people had to become what's called self-sufficient, meaning they had to kind of work and try and make food and try and survive without really the help of others. So if a family came over there, they were all kind of expected to work together to help a person out. Where in the East, you probably had, a very basic setup like this. Okay, a lot of the men went to work and went to have a job. A lot of the women and children stayed home, and the women took care of the children. And that was a very basic setup. But in the Great Plains, pretty much everyone in the family had to contribute to survive. People had to deal with extreme weather, which is something we'll look more at Thursday. They had to work on living isolated, and they had obviously conflicts with the Native Americans, which we already saw with the Battle of Little Bighorn yesterday, amongst some other problems that we've seen kind of going forward as well. All right. With that being said, let's take a look at specifically the role of women, because women on the frontier, women in the Great Plains had a much different life in a good way because a lot more responsibility was given to women. So men and women were looked at as equals in the Great Plains. There wasn't this kind of divide between, men being better than women sort of thing, because both men and women needed to do the chores. Both men and women needed to hunt. You've got to see this photo here. I mean, it's women holding guns because they would go out and hunt, okay, for food, okay. If they just needed to do kind of the same things that men were doing. And they were expected to share responsibilities in working jobs and working around the house. All right. Now, I don't know how your family setup is. Sometimes, maybe the father in a family is, still the one that traditionally works and the mother stays home, but more often than not, in 2020, men and women are often sharing responsibilities in terms of working, in terms of what to do around the house. Some men cook, a lot of the stereotypes that you would kind of go here. Did I leave it? Okay. So since a lot of the women in the Great Plains were kind of doing a lot of the same things as men, this would start to lead to an increase in rights for women. You'll start to see this as time goes on when we get to the women's rights movement around Unit 4 and Unit 5, how a lot of women's referred back to how they were living in the Great Plains, how they were trusted to live a certain way in the Great Plains, and obviously they expected that throughout the entire country, not just in one area of the country. So if you went to the Great Plains, you would see women, pretty much living a very equal life to men, which is something you honestly would not see if you lived in New York City, or if you lived in Chicago, or if you lived in Georgia. Okay? So the Great Plains, moving out west, good for women, for sure. I definitely want to mention that because women start to get into an increase in rights, and that definitely is something that can come up on the regions. We alluded to this yesterday. We spoke about it yesterday. Now you're just officially writing it in your notes. I want to make sure that we have it on the same page. A lot of settlers would hunt for buffalo from the Great Plains. This would lead to conflicts with Native Americans because, again, the Native Americans were taking the buffalo as well. And this led to the buffalo's near extinction, and also led to a lot of Native Americans moving. So my understanding is that the Native Americans didn't necessarily have a set home in the Great Plains. A lot of them, they were forced onto reservations, yes, but a lot of them out in the Great Plains, they would basically go where the buffalo went. If a lot of buffalo moved, okay, to a different area or a different place in the Great Plains, a lot of Native Americans would follow. All right, and obviously as they become more and more scarce, this really hurts the Native American population because they relied on the buffalo to live their lives. It would be like, us in our situation if they took away all of the supermarkets. That's the only place I get food. I don't grow really my own food, so if I want food, I go to the supermarket. And if you take away that, that's going to be a huge problem for my lifestyle. All right, because I need food to eat, and so do the Native Americans. They need the buffalo to eat. They also need buffalo for shelter, and they pretty much use every part of the animal. And this is, again, something you'll see on Thursday. All right, if you don't have this down, obviously it would be on YouTube, but I need to move on. Let's just check out these regions' questions. All right, let's get the chat going here. The Homestead Act, the mass killing of buffalo, and the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad are most closely associated with the what? So these three things led to what situation in the United States? A little bit of a tough question because you got to make some connections. But let's see who can get it first. Laura coming out with a 4. Anicia, Lena, 4. Evan, 4. Yeah, I agree. 4 is correct. All right. The Plains Indians, the Native Americans that were coming out at this point, they were obviously struggling. The Homestead Act encourages white settlers to move west. The mass killing of buffalo obviously hurts the Plain Indian, and obviously the Transcontinental Railroad, of course, encourages settlers to come out as well. So the more settlers that come out towards the Native American land, the bigger decline of the Plains Indians. All right. Political rights for women grew most rapidly on the western frontier because what? Oh, you guys are already beating me to the punch. Yes, 3. Pioneer life often required men and women to share responsibilities equally. You ever see the word pioneer? A pioneer is another word for a settler, someone who's going out and exploring a new area and living in a new area. So sometimes you'll see pioneer life. Just use that word in your vocabulary repertoire. All right, so that's the settlers, that's the men and the women. Now let's look at the Native Americans. Now, basically a law is going to be passed because so many conflicts like the Battle of Little Bighorn, which you saw yesterday, are happening. So the United States government's going to kind of try and step in and basically try and legislate how people live. And really interesting how they do this here. This is called the Dawes Act. So I'll give you a minute to copy it down. We'll see how Native American treatment's still not great. This isn't one of the better laws we've had in American history. So we'll talk about this shortly, but definitely write it down. You will have most of your assignment, which will start in about 5-10 minutes, focus on the Dawes Act. So you just have a little bit of notes on it. Okay, so I actually want to start with the definition of assimilate. Anytime I see the Dawes Act, I think of assimilation, and let's go over what assimilate means. So I think every immigrant or any person coming into a new situation, this could be you in high school. You guys are all going to new schools next year. Don't worry, it's not as scary as you think. You guys will get used to it and become very good students and love high school. It just takes a little bit of time. But basically, you have a choice. Do you want to stick to your own identity and who you are, which is fine, or do you want to assimilate and become more a part of a group or more a part of a culture? It's really a choice that everyone has. In America, you have the freedom to kind of be more individual and be more true to your identity, or become more part of the group, and each are fine and each have their pros and cons in their own way. What's bad about this particular law, okay, the government basically tried to force a group of people to assimilate into American society. And I think this was a huge mistake because, one, people just don't like being told what to do and how to live their life. And two, that's like really, really tough to try and do. Like, how do you tell someone exactly how to live their life, how to dress, how to say, what job to have? That's like anti-American. So this law came out, and it's called the Dawes Act. It was passed by Congress in 1887. And it was a passage by Congress to try and break up the Indian tribes and assimilate Native Americans into society. Okay, and you'll see kind of how this goes on a little bit. But basically, the Native American tribes are coming into conflict with a lot of the settlers that have moved out west. We've seen this for now 50, 60 years. And basically, they want to, get rid of the tribe. All right. And what they're going to do is they're going to try and encourage them to assimilate and become, quote unquote, more American. So anyone who agreed to leave their tribe and become more American would be given farmland, okay, of their own. So that was pretty encouraging for people and enticing. And they'd also be given U.S. citizenship. So, understand, I'm not sure if I've ever made this clear, but Native American tribes are technically their own sovereign nation. They're not really technically led by the United States government. And since we kind of recognize that, we can't necessarily tell them what to do. So a big example is a lot of Native American tribes will make casinos. Okay, so if you go up north to Foxwoods Casino in Connecticut or Mohegan Sun Casino, these are built on Native American tribal lands because the state of Connecticut, they're not allowed to build a casino, but in the tribes they can. So they kind of have some different set of laws. So Native Americans follow their own tribe, their own laws, their own rules. But the Dawes Act is trying to stop that from happening. Now, were Native Americans forced to? No, they weren't forced to. But they were given a lot of reason to leave their tribes because, again, they're given free land. And they can live their lives on their own, okay? And what's going to happen is, if you see in the top right corner here, when a lot of Native American tribes break up, that's going to set up more land. If you saw yesterday with the Battle of Little Bighorn, remember the gold was in the Black Hills where the Sioux Lakota tribe were. And if the Sioux Lakota tribe was not there, then, the white settlers can go there and then maybe strike gold there. This is breaking up land. Okay, and giving more land to people that are moving out west. You have to just take my word for this. You'll learn in Unit 4 how America's population just gets double or triple in like 20, 30 years because we have a lot more immigrants coming in. It's like a whole thing that you'll learn about. But ultimately, we have so many more people coming into the country. We have all of this space. We're trying to fill out all of the land. And obviously, some of the quote-unquote Native Americans are, I don't know how else to say this, are getting in the way, according to a lot of the U.S. government. So the Dawes Act was a way to try and encourage Native Americans to assimilate and become a part of our American culture and not be quote-unquote Native Americans anymore. All right, so this is an interesting law. It's, basically like, kind of encouraging people to not follow a certain religion or trying to encouraging people to not be who they are. And I don't think that's really our federal government's business. And this is clearly one of those situations where I think they try and, this is me being a little biased, but overstepping their boundaries, trying to get people to live a certain way. And you'll see that when you get to the assignment. Like if you open up the assignment and you scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll see a Native American in 1885, and then you'll see a Native American, the same person, in 1890, and they look completely different. The way they dress, the way they act. So, it's a tricky situation. All right. So this is the Dawes Act. All right. I think it's time to get that Supreme Court case out. So here comes the music. Okay, so we're going to a Supreme Court case alert. This is a tricky one to write down because you have some vocabulary. So it may be good to kind of get the vocabulary in somewhere because this is, again, using that term interstate commerce again, which is maybe something you remember from Gibbons versus Ogden, but maybe you don't. But let's go over how the Transcontinental Railroad causes some problems within our country after it's built. All right, so I'll give you a minute to copy down what's in red into the Supreme Court case packet. I would copy everything in red. If you could sneak it in there, that would be most helpful. Okay, so obviously I know you're not done copying. I do want to bring your attention to the map of the Transcontinental Railroad and kind of give you a kind of vision of how it looks. You have some different companies, but let's just look at this map so you have a good understanding of what's going on here. Yesterday, you saw the Transcontinental Railroad was built from this green line and then kind of this part of orange line, and it's kind of cut down the middle. We saw the Transcontinental Railroad be built from here out west to here, and then obviously connects to a big railroad in the east. So you see this Transcontinental Railroad go throughout the entire country. And then you have a couple others here in red, some other companies, the Northern Pacific and the Southern Pacific, that go out west here. Okay, now here's the problem. Anything not said in the Constitution is reserved to the states. We talked about the 10th Amendment. So what was happening was each state, as the train went state to state, each state had their own ticket prices. So let's just take this blue one. Okay, so it starts in Louisiana. So let's say to ride the train, you had to pay $1. Okay, you get to Louisiana. Now you get to Texas. Now you had to pay a separate fee for Texas. Maybe it costs $1.50 to ride in Texas. Okay, now you ride through Texas. Now you get to New Mexico. Now maybe it costs $4 in New Mexico. Okay, then it goes to Arizona. Maybe now it costs $2. Every single time you got to a new state, you had to pay a different rate. So if you were riding on a train, okay, whether just to travel, you had to pay different ticket prices. Or, this is the really bad thing, if you were trading, every single time you traded through a new state, you had to pay basically like a new state tax. That's the best way I can explain it. This is a problem because people were discouraged from riding the train. People were discouraged from trading because it cost way too much money. So when I took a train trip from New York to Washington, D.C., I did this a year and a half ago. When I took a train trip from Washington, D.C. to New York City, I paid one fee. It cost me $100. Right, that's it. When I ride on a plane, it costs me one fee. It doesn't cost me money every single time we fly over a new state. Okay, it just cost me one flat payment. Okay, so you could tell that problems were happening because every single time a train entered a new state, it had to pay a separate fee or some more money. So that's going to change here with this Supreme Court case. It's called Wabash, St. Louis and Pacific Railroad versus Illinois. Okay, so Illinois was the state that it had the problem with, and Wabash was riding the St. Louis and Pacific Railroad. So it's a combined Supreme Court case versus the state of Illinois. Okay, so the court forbid all states from setting its own rates and ticket prices on its customers and trading. Okay, states could not make their own ticket prices. They were not allowed to basically charge people 5-6 times if they traveled across all of these different states. Only one price could be set throughout a train ride. All right, guys, in the chat, just curious, have you guys ever taken a train or a plane A train, well, I should say this. Have you ever taken a train across multiple states? Or the better question is, has anyone been on an airplane? Of course, right? You guys have been on airplanes. Okay. So you understand, okay, that hopefully, ask your parents, when they paid for the airplane flight, they weren't paying multiple prices, okay, over each state that they flew over. You could thank this Supreme Court case for that. Okay. Only one price could be set throughout a train ride. All right. Remember, the Transcontinental Railroad went across many states, so this made it a lot easier. If you just set one set price, it made life easier for a lot of people. It also helped create something called the Interstate Commerce Commission. Okay. A commission's a group of people. So if I was to make a social studies commission and I was to take the 4 or 5 top social studies students in the school, that's a commission. It's a group of people. Usually we discuss things and work together to figure things out. So our federal government created an Interstate Commerce Commission, which basically focused on making sure the trade between the states was okay. Okay, interstate means between states. Commerce means trade. These are now review words. Hopefully these are words that you're starting to remember. Okay, Josh, no problem. Okay. And now, since we have an Interstate Commerce Commission, and they're the ones that are helping to set the prices of the train rides, okay, since they're doing it now, this is going to strengthen the federal government. The states no longer have control, okay, with setting their own ticket prices. And this should make sense, because if you go back to Gibbons versus Ogden, Gibbons versus Ogden said that anyone that is dealing with multiple states, it then becomes a federal government issue. Okay, if you travel between 2 or 3 states and there's a problem, like let's say, you bring a gun across 3 or 4 state lines illegally, you don't own the gun, and you get caught, you're not going to be charged in a state court, you're going to be charged in a federal court. So if you have people traveling across multiple states, the federal government needs to be the group that kind of oversees that and makes sure that the train companies are doing the right thing, because otherwise no one's going to hold the train companies accountable for doing the right thing. All right. Please let me know if there's any questions on that. Otherwise, we're going to take about 20 minutes and start working on our assignment. Now, the assignment's a little long today. A little long. It's one of, it's just there's a lot of questions and short readings and stuff. And then there's an exit ticket at the end. So you guys can take a look at this. I don't think it's overly hard, but it definitely is a little longer than I'm used to giving. Try and get as much done as possible. Okay, so as you can see, you have 3 components of this. First thing you should do is you should hit open with and then open up with Google Docs. The reason why is it will just come out a lot cleaner and nicer for you to edit. As you see here, I hit open with Google Docs and it starts to look a little bit more straightforward. I don't know why it didn't come up as a Google Doc. I tried, it just won't. So look, usual stuff, reading, short question, reading, short question. You got 3 of those, okay? Then you have a little bit of DBQ practice. These aren't the same type of DBQs that you're used to seeing, but you're still doing your usual DBQ stuff. So this should take about 2 or 3 minutes per question. Restate quote for document 1, document 2, document 3, and document 4. This is the picture I was referring to before, guys, about the Native American in 1885 and 1890, before the Dawes Act, after the Dawes Act. Okay, you could probably tell he's Native American, but he don't dress like he's a part of a Native American tribe. That is clear. He's dressed like a typical American back in the 1880s. Okay, and then of course you have 3 practice regions questions here. You could just highlight the answers as you go through. So it's 8:54. You got about 17, 18 minutes. I think if you're ambitious, you could finish before the class ends. So I want to leave you to that. I will be taking attendance, and obviously, please let me know if you have any questions. Okay. I want to remind you also on Thursday, you have your textbook Thursday, and then on Monday, you will have your test. Yeah, Lizmel, basically. That's a good way to think of it. We like to use the word assimilate because gentrification and assimilation are a little bit different. But if you want to at least use that word in a very similar way, I don't have much of a problem. But the word that we're looking for is assimilation. That's more of the correct vocabulary. All right. And if you haven't done the essay, it is now 10 points off. But please still hand it in, guys. You do not want a 0. I'm going to start grading them today. You just don't want a 0. Not on an essay, not on a test grade, please. For the love of God. All right. I'll be here if you have any questions.